Achtung, Achtung. Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. And James, we are joined today by a special guest. Who are we talking to today, Jim? And this is an excellent topic.
It's an excellent topic, but we're also talking to someone who's pretty eminent. I mean, Robert Child is an Emmy-nominated screenwriter, director, and actor and author. He's made God knows how many historical documentaries. He's been there, done it, got the T-shirt on literally kind of everything kind of media related. He's done podcasts himself. But for our purposes, he is the author of Immortal Valour, the Black Medal of Honor winners. And there were 7 of them in the Second World War. And boy, do they all have really, really interesting stories. I'm particularly struck, I have to say, Rob, by a couple of them especially. But you are very welcome, and thank you for joining us. I mean, I suppose the first thing is how did you get to kind of write this book, and what prompted it?
Well, James, thank you for that introduction. I don't know if I can live up to that, but I'll try. This book came about because I did an earlier film. You mentioned my films. I did a film called The Weareth 11 that was nominated for an Emmy, and that was in 2011, 2012-ish, and that turned into a book. I was approached by an author about turning the documentary into a book called The Lost 11 back in 2015. And I said, sure. So she contacted her agent about pitching to Penguin Random House the idea of The Lost 11, which is a story about black soldiers in World War II who were massacred during the Battle of the Bulge. And Penguin said, yes, let's do it. So we wrote that, took 2 years, and it came out in 2017. And I was looking for my next project. And in researching the book, The Lost 11, I felt like there were so many stories of black soldiers in World War II, American soldiers whose stories hadn't been told. And I wanted to continue along in that vein. And I was talking with the reenactor coordinator that I had on the Weareth 11, Art Collins. And I said, Art, I think the best book to do would be to follow the Medal of Honor recipients, the Black Medal of Honor recipients of World War II. And the problem that I initially encountered was there wasn't much information on any of them, only a couple. So I knew it would be a big research challenge to do this story, and it was.
Wait, you pulled it off, if I might say so.
Yeah, I just started with the basics, basically. I researched their family histories through genealogy sites, Ancestry.com, and started putting the jigsaw pieces together to build up their lives. Some of them, like George Watson and Willie James Jr., had like a paragraph. On there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I had to build up their.
And he's and George Watson. He's the first one to receive the DSC, isn't he? The Distinguished Service Cross.
Yeah, he saved all those men in the South Pacific when his ship went down, and they're all distinctive. But yes, I believe he was the first one to receive the DSC. All but one of them received the DSC.
Robert, why are they lost in mystery? What? Because the Medal of Honor is a big deal as an award to be given. I mean, how come they faded from view?
Well, it was a combination of factors, I think. Basically, it was the racism in the country and in the military, and they were sidelined for over 50 years, where no black service members were awarded the Medal of Honor from World War II.
Yeah, because this is the point, isn't it? They all got them in much later, didn't they?
Yeah, 1997. So it took over 50 years. And that was prompted by, in the early 80s, no black service members from World War I had received the Medal of Honor either. So there was a campaign to award 2 soldiers the Medal of Honor from that. And that started the ball rolling with the Department of Defense to look into why no black soldiers had received the Medal of Honor either from World War II. So they had been sidelined for over 50 years. So there wasn't much investigation done on their lives.
Gosh. So they'd been nominated, had they, for other awards? What was the process to select these 7 men, and then how they were then made the cut, as it were? Because at such historical distance, it gets much more difficult, doesn't it?
Sure, they use the criteria of the Distinguished Service Cross, which medal, which was the second highest medal for valor in the American military, and the research.
I mean, that's a big award, isn't it? I mean, let's say that's the sort of equivalent of getting a DSO in the Distinguished Service Order in British Army.
Yes, exactly. Second highest medal. So they used that because Eisenhower used that to elevate some soldiers in the North African campaign, I believe, to the Medal of Honor. And they used that in the study on World War I to elevate the black soldiers to the Medal of Honor. So they used that as the criteria to start. And
right.
There were all but one had been awarded the DSC, except for Reuben Rivers, who had been awarded the Silver Star. And
his action is just
incredible,
insane.
Yeah, isn't it?
How courageous he is! It is absolutely amazing. I mean, we should get on to. I quite like to sort of, do brief prodded history of all 7, but it would be great to kind of focus on a couple.
Sure.
But Rob, just to sort of wind back a little bit. I mean, I think people have heard of the Tuskegee Airmen and so on. But at what point do Black Americans become combat troops?
Sure.
In the Second World War? Because to start off with, they're not, are they? And it's only later on. I mean, obviously you've got the 92nd Buffalo Division in Italy. And I remember talking to kind of veterans of that. But it's a while coming, isn't it?
It is, because they were sort of relegated to service roles, rear echelon duty, because there was a belief that they wouldn't perform well in combat. And that was the result of a study done in 1925 by the Army War College that really was a racist study that said black soldiers weren't as brave or intelligent as white soldiers, which obviously isn't true, but that set the tone for going into World War II, that study between wars. And for that reason, black soldiers were shifted into quartermaster units, other things, where they served for years. And it was only until the Battle of the Bulge, right after the Battle of the Bulge, up until that, there was such attrition in the white rifle companies after the German attack that they needed bodies. They needed soldiers on the front lines. So Eisenhower's group there, his generals, and he led it, decided that they should offer the opportunity and the privilege, quote unquote privilege, to serve on the front lines in combat to black service personnel who were in service roles. So in December 1944, they opened up the door to combat training in France for black soldiers. And they were overwhelmed with nearly 5,000 applicants for a little over 2,000 places. So, yeah, they whittled it down so the black soldiers only entered combat really in early 1945.
Do we know why people were volunteering? Because by the end of the war, the Second World War, British soldiers, they feel they're going to get a welfare state out of it at the end. Indian soldiers, a lot of Indian volunteers in particular, they're thinking in terms of, well, we defeat the Japanese Empire so we can rid ourselves of the British Empire eventually. What's the deal? Is there a deal? What's the bargain? Do we know?
Yeah, there was a driving force that I discovered behind black service personnel wanting to serve in combat, because there was a campaign stateside called the Double V campaign, which was launched by a letter to the Pittsburgh Courier newspaper, which is a black newspaper. And it was, what it stood for was victory at home and victory abroad, Double V. And the belief was if black soldiers served honorably in World War II and did their part, then they would earn the equality that they had not had at home. So there was it was there. There was a drive in the back of their minds that I have to show them that I'm just as good as the white soldiers, just as brave, just as, courageous and intelligent.
Yeah.
So it was,
and you see that in the Tuskegee Airmen as well, Tom.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is exactly the same motivation. We're going to show them, and boy, did they. I mean,
yeah. There was that. Absolutely, that was the driving force, because there was a lot of grumbling. When the black soldiers were relegated to these service roles, even Edward Carter, Sergeant Carter, wrote home to his wife, why should I push a mop, for the war when I've got all these skills.
It's interesting you bring up him, because he's the one that I knew about before I read your book, and I don't know whether I've got a UK edition or an American edition, but he's definitely the guy on the front cover of the book I've got, looking devilishly handsome as well, I have to say. I mean, he is. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. I mean, what a dude. Yeah. I mean, he's a devilishly handsome fellow. His story is quite extraordinary, isn't it? And I mean, born in Los Angeles, a missionary father, but an Anglo-Indian mother. He grows up in India. Then they move to Shanghai, and he volunteers to fight age 15, doesn't he?
Yep.
Yeah, this is a guy who wants to fight, isn't it? It's a guy who wants the adventure and fighting.
Well, but he's also got this incredible moral compass, hasn't he? Yeah. I mean, he believes in fighting for people's rights and for freedom, and he's a sort of massive anti-oppressor, anti-dictator. He hates all that kind of right-wing shit.
Yeah, he is. Plus, he had a father who was a dictator.
Yeah, maybe. So maybe it's a reaction against that.
Maybe that's what's going on. Yeah,
maybe not that extreme, but he wanted to get out from under the thumb of his father, and he did want to serve, and he joins the Chinese, doesn't he? The Chinese army in 1932. It's all 32. That's right. Yeah, the Shanghai incident. Yeah,
I mean, it's just incredible.
Exactly, the Chinese 19th Army that was overseen by broadly Chiang Kai-shek, and he fought the Japanese Marines, who invaded, Shanghai, China, and performed bravely. And as I say in the book, they were about to elevate him to lieutenant when his father came and...
Such has been his obvious leadership and bravery.
Yeah, exactly. Before his father collected him and said, no, you can't do this, you're underage. And they were kind of left hanging. But that's what he knew. He was a soldier from the age of 15. And it's amazing. His whole career. So many people have told me that, his story is a movie, and I agree. And I work closely with his daughter-in-law, Aline Carter.
Right.
I'm actually going to see her at an event at the National World War II Museum this week.
But, I mean, his life before the Second World War comes is sort of plenty to be getting on with, isn't it? I mean, he fights for, like I say, he fights for the Chinese. He gets himself to Abyssinia to fight against or tries to go to fight against the Italians.
Becomes a merchant seaman, doesn't he? I mean, he covers old boots to do that.
He fights for the Republicans in Spain. I mean, this guy's with it, and like you say, with this sort of righteous sense of looking for fascists to fight, smash, isn't he? Basically, it's extraordinary.
Absolutely, and it was also, I think, a result of the Great Depression in the States. There was no work for young black men at the time, so he was either on unemployment or he was, wanted to
fighting fascists.
Fighting fascists.
Well, I mean, how I got to find out about him, I was in Spain actually this time last year. God, I can't believe a year's gone. I was this time last year, and he came across my radar when I was looking at the Spanish Civil War this time last year, and I just thought, God, why have I never heard of this guy? I mean, what was he like? I mean, he seems like he's sort of super bright and natural leadership and all that kind of stuff. I mean, have I got that right?
Yeah, he was. He inspired men to follow him. That's why he was elevated to squad leader. And He just had a charisma. This is what I gleaned from my research. He just had a charisma that he was going to get the job done. And, you got to be with him. You don't want to be against him.
Yeah. He was a my way or the highway guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he was very disciplined, and he took great pride in being a soldier. It was what made him him. And he was very proud to earn the DSC. I mean, the picture, I believe it's in the book, of him receiving the DSC in Los Angeles. He just is the picture of pride in receiving that medal. And you mentioned the Spanish Civil War. He was labeled, unfortunately, as you know, a communist for being involved with that conflict when he didn't believe in communism at all. But he was, fighting for freedom. So he thought. And that label followed him into civilian life after World War II.
Oh God!
Oh dear, yeah, I can see
that's
what that's
unfortunate, isn't it? Yeah.
But just to backtrack a bit on him, because I think Eddie Carter is just so interesting. So he survives the Spanish Civil War, gets back to the US. He joins pretty early on, doesn't he? The US Army.
Yeah.
It's like 1941.
Yeah, September 1941. He joined up and trained at Fort Benning. And he was part of a quartermaster unit there. But he was written up in the Post-Gazette several times as the best marksman in the unit. So, I mean, and his favorite weapon was the Tommy gun, but he was labeled as the best marksman. And it was very frustrating for him, to have these skills and not be able to use them. And he was...
Yeah, must have been.
He petitioned the Army almost daily to be allowed to enter combat. And he was one of the soldiers who took up the offer at the end of 1944, Eisenhower's letter of the privilege of joining a rifle company. And he was one of the soldiers who trained and joined, the Mystery Division, 12th Armored, and went into Germany early on into unscouted territory. I mean, they were entering territory that where around any corner there would be Germans hiding, and that's what happened to him. His convoy was ambushed.
Yeah, so tell the story of what he does to win his Medal of Honor.
Sure.
DSC, then Medal of Honor.
Yeah, he was entering, I don't recall the town offhand, but he was entering a town in Germany, and his convoy was ambushed from an abandoned warehouse 150 yards off the side of the road by an 88 and a machine gun nest of Germans. And they were pinned down on the road. They couldn't move. So he volunteered to take some men over to the warehouse and take it out. And his commander said, well, all right, if you think you can do it. So he plans and he starts crossing open ground. Basically, the grass wasn't that high. Starts crossing open ground towards the warehouse, and they're still firing at the convoy. And two of his men were wounded and tried to retreat back. He was shot 9 times. Yeah, 9 times. And one time he was on the ground hiding after he was shot, and he raised his canteen to his mouth, and a bullet came through his hand and shot the canteen out of his hand. I mean, he was in bad shape, but he didn't give up. He said he had his Tommy gun with him, his trusted Tommy gun, and he made a plan. He waited there for 2 hours. He knew that the Germans would come out and start looking for the bodies, and eliminating them. So he made a plan to, with the 9 wounds he had, that he would take these Germans out. And it so happens the German patrol of 8 soldiers came out, and he knew that they would call if they saw him, and he did hear them call him American in German, and he had rehearsed his move to throw all his weight on his Tommy gun, stand up, and take them all out. And he did. He took out 6 of the 8 in this patrol. and the remaining two just raised their hands and froze. And mind you, he's wounded with 9, wounds. And what he does is he grabs one of the men, puts him in front of him, another German, and puts him behind him, and backs 150 yards back towards the convoy. Where both sides...
It's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, both sides are...
I mean, if you saw that, the problem you're going to have when you make the movie, Rob, is that when you do that, no one's going to believe it.
Yeah. No one will believe that. It's completely absurd. Yeah.
Well, there were many witnesses, including the Germans, who were awestruck. But wait, it gets better. What he did when he reached, the convoy, his commander said, "Well, that's great. You got to get, you got to evacuate and get yourself, mended up. This is amazing." And he said, "Wait, I can't leave. We don't know what's up ahead of us." And they were kind of dumbstruck. And he said, we have to know what's ahead of us. So I'm going to interrogate these men. And they're like, "What?" And they started interrogating them in German that he learned in his time in Shanghai. So he was able to interrogate these men, find out the hidden placements up ahead, the German emplacements from these men who gave up the information. And he said, "All right, now we've gotten our information. I'll evacuate now." So he allowed the convoy to proceed safely with that information that he gleaned from the Germans in German, which, it's just amazing.
That's just incredible.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And then how long did he take to recover from his wounds? Was he, if he's been shot 9 times, is he in hospital for a long time, or does he? The war ends before. Obviously, the war ends before he recovers.
Actually, no.
No, right? Okay.
But wait, there's more.
No way.
He's in the hospital, and he writes his wife Mildred about his wounds, and he said, "I can't wait to get back to my unit. They didn't shoot me up that bad." And he lists, where his wounds are. And he gets a little sick of being in the hospital. And he hitches a ride with the captain in the 10th Armored back to the front. He sneaks out of the hospital and gets back to the front within a couple miles of the 12th Armored. And when he arrives, just as he arrives at his unit, the hospital contacts his unit, and they tell his commander, that he's gone AWOL. And his commander said, "No, actually he hasn't. He's right here in front of me." And we're going to put him back on the line. That's like the most...
presumably some of his 9 wounds are exit wounds, right?
Yeah, there's some through the arm and leg. They're exit wounds too. But still, he recovered. He was like Superman.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, and
it's absolutely ridiculous. And what happens to him after the war? He survives, obviously.
Yeah, he survives and goes back to...
He doesn't make old bones, though, does he?
No, he doesn't. No, he retires goes back to civilian life in Los Angeles, and encounters a lot of trouble there. He's awarded the DSC in Los Angeles, but he wants to start a painting company. He applies for a VA loan. He's turned down for the VA loan. There's no work, so he decides to rejoin the Army, and he rejoins the Army, and he's becomes a trainer of some young infantry officers in Fort Lewis, Washington. But when he goes to reenlist in 1949, because of his service in Spain and him being labeled a communist, they prevent him from reenlisting. So he's denied reenlistment, even though he was awarded the DSC. And then he goes on a letter writing campaign to try to get back into the Army. A lot of frustration. He actually, at one point, through his lawyer, returns the DSC to the military, but his lawyer doesn't actually give it back to the government because he holds on to it, because he knows that Sergeant Carter will want it back. So the end of his life was really a study in frustration, and he had trouble with his wife because of this, and Aline Carter, his daughter-in-law, Mildred, told her that it was very frustrating because she didn't know why the Army would prevent such a soldier from rejoining, and she doubted him. And
no, it's insane.
Right. And so they kind of drifted apart, and he passed away from, I believe it was lung cancer at age of 47 in January of 1963. No. So, that could have been the end of his story, but it wasn't. And, what he had done was so incredible that he was one of the men who was studied in the study at Shaw University and elevated to the Medal of Honor.
Well, and it sounds like completely deservedly so. It's just an incredible story.
That's why I put him on the cover, because it just...
so he's your favorite too, isn't he?
Yeah, I think they're all my favorite because...
I know what you mean. Of course they are. Because you get so close to these guys.
Exactly. You really do. You get to be almost protective of these guys like Vernon Baker and, Charles Thomas. And they're all different from each other, but they all had that one quality of just valor and bravery above the call of duty. And that's what the criteria for the Medal of Honor is, above and beyond gallantry above and beyond the call of duty. And they certainly fit that mold. And, I want people to really look at these men as warriors, not just these are black men who happen to be warriors.
No, of course.
But But these are people to be admired, emulated by soldiers today.
We need to take a quick break right now. We'll see you in a moment. Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Is this a common experience after the war for these men? That they regard life as a sort of frustration because they're not, that the promise isn't fulfilled, and racism reasserts itself or asserts itself around their lives. Is this something you'll see with Charles L. Thomas and Vernon J. Baker? Is this a thing that happens to all of them essentially?
It is. There was great disappointment that the Double V campaign didn't really bear fruit, and the country remained for another 20 years until the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s, divided and, racially divided and prejudiced. There's no whitewashing it, quote unquote. There's no, painting a rosy picture here. It was a divided racist country, and that's just the way it was. And it took, the Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King and those forces to correct this. Even though the military did desegregate by Truman's order, it took a while for them to be integrated. And I can't speak for the military now, but I assume it's much, much better for soldiers in the military now. Not like it was, obviously. But
well, I remember when I was studying the 92nd Buffalo Division, it was just it was just appalling. The whole thing was set up with Southern white officers, and they were just humiliated at every turn. They were kind of belittled at every single turn during their training. Their training was absolutely brutal, as you can imagine. And they got out to Italy, with motivation levels that kind of sort of, minus 20. I mean, how can you blame them? And yet, despite that, they did incredible things. And actually, one of your guys in this list is a 92nd Division guy, isn't he?
Yeah, Vernon Baker is part of the 370.
And just, total self-sacrifice. I mean, there is no other phrase for it. I mean, it's because he's in a town, Germans counterattack. He knows the only way he's going to stop that counterattack is bringing the artillery on, but he's stranded in a second story of a building, isn't he? Something like that. Is that right?
That's John Fox.
John Fox. Okay, so that's John Fox, and but he's 92nd Division, isn't he?
He is.
And so he's stranded in this second story of this building, and he knows that the only way he can stop this is by calling in the artillery, which will also land on him.
Yeah, they were outnumbered in Somma Colonia, which is in Tuscany, and he was in a stone tower that was built in the Middle Ages, and he was the forward observer for artillery, and he could see, all the Germans coming and pouring in from every direction, and resorting to hand-to-hand combat on the ground, and they were just swarming, and he had no choice. When he did call in an artillery strike on his position, because they didn't believe him at first, as you may have read in the book. They had to have him repeat his order and ask him if he was sure. And then they brought...
And wasn't it his friend was on the other end of the line?
Yeah. His close friend was the one who had to give the artillery coordinates and the fire coordinates to the field artillery, which is amazing in itself. And and
Fox just says, "Fire it! Give them hell."
Yep. Give them hell. There's more of them than there are of us.
So, that's right.
So
amazing. I mean, it's incredible.
But it's that, John. That's your position. I know how to read a damn map. I know. I mean, it's again, if you put that in a film, people might not believe it. It's extraordinary to call in a fire mission on your own position.
It is.
Well, only James Bond does that, doesn't he?
Yes, only James Bond has done that in recent cinematic history, and everyone thought that was absurd.
Yeah, very true.
I did. I felt it was completely absurd. But Rob, the other one that really, really, I think struck me was the Reuben Rivers story. Then the only guy who doesn't get the DSE gets a Silver Star. I mean, that's an incredible story. And he's with the famous Black Panthers.
Yeah, 761st Tank Battalion became Patton's Black Panthers because he requested, Patton needed tankers, and he requested back for tankers, and they told him, well, the only ones we have left are the quote-unquote Negro tankers. And it's reported that Patton said, I didn't ask about color, I asked for tankers. So that's why they became his Black Panthers. And he gave the speech that, when they arrived, I don't care, what the press says, but I want you to, fight like hell for me. So they did. And Reuben Rivers was born in Oklahoma, and
he's a farmer, isn't he? Is that the son of a farmer?
Yeah, a tenant farmer in Oklahoma, and
so you can imagine what that's like.
Oh yeah, hard scrabble life.
1930s.
Oh, yeah, I mean, ridiculous.
Huge family, too many mouths to feed, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And three of his two other brothers served in the war, and but he served in the 761st Tank Battalion, and his commander, David Williams. Reuben was kind of stoic. He just didn't say much, but he let his bravery prove out on in the field. And what you referenced before, how he received the Silver Star, was amazing because they were entering a town under fire. They were following the infantry support, and there was a mined tree trunk across the road blocking the convoy, and the infantry was pinned down, and Reuben's tank was at the very end. So they were stuck. They couldn't go anywhere. So Reuben took his tank, went around the column, went to the front to find out what was happening. And as his commander says, where the hell are you going? And he reaches the mined tree trunk, jumps out under fire, the mortar fire, small arms fire, and machine gun fire, and wraps the steel tow cable around the tree trunk, which has mines in it. And by the time he's finished, all the mortar fire and small arms fire are now on his position, directed at him. So he jumps back in the tank, pulls the tree trunk off the road, exploding mines, but they were able to continue. It's basically saved the convoy from, being sitting ducks. there.
But that's on the 8th of November 1944, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But he's not done either. I mean, he's a bit like kind of
no.
He's a bit like Eddie. He's kind of he's got unfinished
He's
business
got
when it comes to the bravery.
Yeah.
More to offer on the bravery stakes.
Yeah, he becomes the lead tanker for Captain Williams, and as the lead tanker, he takes out
a curious privilege at the best of times.
Yeah. I mean, it takes out a Tiger tank, point blank range in the next town, and just is wreaking havoc. And he, in the lead, they enter a town where he's crossing over a railroad crossing with his tank and hits a teller mine, which blows the tracks off his tank, spins it around, and his leg is injured severely, so much so that he can barely walk. So he crawls out of his tank, and his commander says, well, we're going to evacuate you, Reuben, back behind the lines. And he refused. And, the medic said, this is a really bad wound. And he pushed, the morphine away and got up and hobbled over to another tank and opened the hatch and motioned the tanker to get out. And he got in this other tank. And his commander said, are you sure? I said, and Reuben says, I'm sure. Let's go. So they kept moving forward further into German-occupied territory. And his pain, his leg, started to realize.
Because it's presumably it's sort of going septic or something.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Exactly. And they finally stop at one town, and he's in such pain that, his commander just about orders him to evacuate. And he refuses again. And he says, you're going to need me in the next couple of days. It won't change it won't be any different in the next couple of days. And gangrene was setting in. So David Williams knew that he needed him, and he couldn't stop him. So he told him, well, when we cross that river into this particular town, the 11th Panzer Division is on the other side, and you're not going to be able to evacuate. And he says, well, let's go. So he was in the lead again, Reuben Rivers, and they came under heavy fire from German anti-tank guns, and Reuben was leading into this town, and he radioed to Williams that he saw the gun and he was going to take it out, but the gunner was too fast, and he fired a shell right into Reuben's lead tank, blew it apart, and another shell followed, and Reuben was killed instantly as the lead tanker. And it really shook up David Williams, and he took up against convention, I'll say, against convention of white commanders recommending the DSC for their brave black soldiers, because they knew that they'd never receive the Medal of Honor. It was an unspoken rule that you do not submit black soldiers for the Medal of Honor. But Williams was different in that he petitioned his commander to have Reuben receive the Medal of Honor. And his commander said, well, I'll see what I can do. I don't know about this. But he refused to submit him for the DSC. And David Williams was instrumental in getting the 761st, the Presidential Unit Citation, which they were awarded, I believe, in the 70s. And he continued to push for Reuben Rivers, his, fearless tanker from Oklahoma, to receive the Medal of Honor. And he was very involved with the Shaw study when the Army commissioned the study to review the Medal of Honor recipients. So much so that I think the researchers at Shaw didn't have a choice. I mean, right. David Williams was going to get, his tanker the Medal of Honor one way or the other. And so he became the anomaly of all the ones names submitted of not receiving the DSC, but the Silver Star for his action. And that was his story.
Wow.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
And it is extraordinary, isn't it, these sort of barriers to bravery being recognized, because, they're going through exactly the same things as anyone else, putting themselves in danger. They've absolutely proved the lie on the idea that they won't be competent. Black people won't be competent soldiers, won't be brave in combat. It's all obviously, evidently, all gone out of the window, hasn't it? I mean, it just shows what bad fuel racism is. If you put whatever engine you put it in, you get bad outcomes, don't you? I mean, that's right up there with any act of heroism or bravery or gallantry I've ever heard of. It seems crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. And, people today don't realize actually how bad it was. And that was one of the surprises I took away from the book, that, boy, this was bad. There was racism, severe racism in the United States in this time period. And people just say, I don't know, maybe it was bad, I don't know. But it was really bad. And that's what surprised me. Even to the point where, these men at the camp, like at Camp Claiborne in Louisiana, the town of Alexandria, which is just outside of it, the rule was when they were out on the town, they had to look down and step off the sidewalk and let a white person pass. And that's how it was, because the rule was you couldn't look white civilians in the eye because that was considered uppity, quote unquote. So, that's reality. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So,
gosh.
Well, they're all. We've highlighted a kind of handful, but all 7 of them are absolutely incredible stories. I mean, I'd urge everyone to get out and read it. It's totally fascinating.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Rob. I mean, Immortal Valour is where you can read about these the Black Medal honor winners. These incredible people, and also
they're really incredible people.
They're incredible people,
really properly amazing.
Yeah, they are.
And is part of the civil rights movement 20 years later, people going, hang on a minute, we were promised something and we weren't delivered it. Is there an element of that post-war that black people are saying, hang on a minute, you promised us this during you promised us equality in the Second World War, you haven't delivered, so we're going to have to push for it now. Is that a thing that motivates the civil rights movement?
Absolutely, because I can use an example of that. Aline Carter, who I mentioned, who's Sergeant Carter's daughter-in-law, she was part of the civil rights movement. She marched on Washington in the 60s, I'm sure in memory of her father-in-law, and to push equality forward that they had been denied. So I would agree, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Just such an interesting story. And like I say, people need to go out and get the book, because it's incredible. They're incredible stories and of incredibly brave people. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks everyone for listening. We will see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Cheerio.